Before the sword, before the code, before the legend, there was only the land. A land forged by fire, shaped by water, and baptized in blood. This is where it all began. The story of Japan does not start with samurai. It does not start with emperors or war. It starts with the earth itself, violent, untamed, and alive. Millennia ago, the islands of Japan rose from the sea, born from the collision of tectonic titans. Volcanoes erupted, spewing fire and ash into the sky. The gods, it seemed, were not yet finished carving their masterpiece. Among the earliest people to walk these lands were the Jaman, a hunter-gatherer society dating back to 14,000 BCE. They lived in harmony with the land, crafting intricate pottery, weaving ropes from bark, and hunting with stone-tipped spears. But theirs was a world of spirits, where every tree, rock, and stream held a soul. They did not know it yet, but their descendants would one day wield blades sharper than the wind. For now they survived, and survival was enough. Then came change. Around 300 BCE, a new wave of migrants arrived from the Korean peninsula, the Yayoi people. With them, they brought rice cultivation, bronze, and iron. The land transformed. Forests were cleared. Paddies flooded. Villages grew into towns. And with surplus food came something dangerous, power. For the first time, men could hoard more than they needed. And where there was wealth, there were those who would take it. Conflict was inevitable. Tribes clashed over land, over resources, over honor. The earliest warriors were not yet samurai, but they were the blueprint. They fought with bronze swords, then iron. They armored themselves in wood and leather. And when they died, they were buried with their weapons, ready for battle even in the afterlife. The dead did not rest. Their spirits watched, and the living would soon need their strength. By the 4th century CE, one clan began to dominate, the Yamato. Through alliances, conquest, and shrewd politics, they absorbed rival tribes. Their leader? Not just a chieftain, but a living god. The emperor, a divine ruler. A kingdom united. But unity is fragile. And the gods are not always kind. The Yamato state was strong, but not invincible. Rival clans simmered with resentment. Beyond the shores, Korea and China loomed, empires hungry for influence. And beneath the surface, something darker stirred. A new class of warriors was emerging. Men who lived by the blade. Men who would one day be called samurai. The age of legends was coming, and it would begin in fire. The islands of Japan emerged from primordial chaos, born from the fiery collisions of tectonic plates deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Volcanoes erupted with terrifying frequency, spewing molten rock and ash across the landscape. Towering mountains rose from the sea, while steaming hot springs dotted the rugged terrain. This was a land shaped by violence, where earthquakes regularly reshaped the coastline and typhoons battered the shores with relentless fury. Into this volatile world came the first human inhabitants, the Jaman people. Around 14,000 BCE, as the last ice age waned, nomadic tribes crossed land bridges from the Asian mainland to settle these untamed islands. The Jaman took their name from the distinctive cord-marked pottery they created, some of the oldest ceramic vessels in human history. These hunter-gatherers lived in harmony with the temperamental land, building pit dwellings partially submerged in the earth for protection against the elements. They crafted sophisticated tools from stone and bone, wove intricate baskets from wild vines, and adorned themselves with jewelry made from shells and animal teeth. The spiritual world permeated every aspect of Jaman life. They worshipped nature spirits known as kami that inhabited ancient trees, unusual rock formations, and rushing waterfalls. Clay figurines called dogu, with their exaggerated feminine features and mysterious geometric patterns, suggest complex fertility rituals and shamanistic practices. At the Sanai Maruyama site in northern Japan, archaeologists have uncovered a large Jaman settlement with raised-floor storehouses and evidence of chestnut cultivation, hinting at the beginnings of settled agriculture. For thousands of years, the Jaman thrived in their isolated island world. Then around 300 BCE, a seismic shift occurred that would forever alter the course of Japanese history. New migrants arrived from the Korean peninsula, bringing with them technologies that would revolutionize life in the islands. These Yayoi people, named after the district in Tokyo where their distinctive pottery was first discovered, introduced wet rice cultivation, bronze and iron metallurgy, and advanced weaving techniques. The impact was immediate and profound. Rice paddies transformed the landscape, requiring coordinated labor and permanent settlements. Bronze mirrors and ceremonial bells became symbols of status and power. Iron tools and weapons made farming and warfare more efficient. Population centers grew rapidly along fertile river plains, particularly in northern Kyushu and the Kinai region around modern-day Osaka and Nara. With these technological advances came social stratification. Some families accumulated wealth in the form of rice surpluses and precious metals, while others worked the fields as common laborers. Village leaders evolved into regional chieftains who commanded both economic and military power. The need to defend rice stores and settle territorial disputes led to increasingly organized warfare. Archaeological finds from this period include iron swords, spearheads, and the remains of wooden stockades surrounding villages. The Yayoi period also saw the introduction of new spiritual practices from the Asian mainland. Bronze ritual objects like the Dotaka bells show Chinese and Korean influences, while stone-lined burial chambers indicate the growing importance of ancestor worship. Shamanistic traditions from the Jomon era merged with new beliefs to form the early foundations of what would become Shinto. By the 3rd century CE, powerful chiefdoms had emerged across western Japan. Chinese historical records from the Wei dynasty describe the land of Wa, Japan, as divided into numerous small states, some of which sent tribute missions to the Chinese court. The most detailed account tells of Queen Himiko, a shaman ruler who governed Yamatai and commanded the loyalty of many lesser chiefs. The exact location of Yamatai remains one of Japan's greatest historical mysteries, but its description marks the transition from tribal society to centralized authority. During the Kofun period, 250 to 538 CE, the political landscape underwent dramatic consolidation. Massive keyhole-shaped burial mounds began appearing across the archipelago, some measuring over 400 meters in length. These Kofun tombs, often surrounded by moats and filled with grave goods like iron weapons, bronze mirrors, and clay Hanawa figurines, served as powerful symbols of the emerging elite class. The Yamato clan rose to prominence during this time, establishing their base in the fertile Nara basin. Through strategic marriages, military conquests, and control of ritual practices, the Yamato gradually extended their influence over rival chiefdoms. They claimed descent from the sun goddess Amaterasu, establishing the imperial line that continues to this day. The Yamato rulers adopted Chinese-style bureaucratic practices, including a ranking system for court officials and the keeping of written records. By the 6th century, the Yamato state faced increasing challenges from powerful regional clans like the Soga and Mononobe. The introduction of Buddhism from Korea in 552 CE sparked violent conflicts between traditional kami worshippers and those embracing the new foreign religion. The Soga clan's victory in these disputes marked a turning point in Japanese history, paving the way for greater cultural exchange with the Asian mainland. The stage was now set for the emergence of a professional warrior class. As the Yamato state expanded, it required armed forces to maintain control over distant provinces and suppress rebellions. Provincial strongmen organized private militias to protect their lands and enforce imperial authority. These early warriors, though not yet called samurai, developed specialized combat skills and a growing sense of martial identity. The turbulent transition from ancient to classical Japan would give birth to a warrior tradition unlike any other in world history. The samurai ethos would eventually permeate every aspect of Japanese society, from art and literature to politics and philosophy. But its origins lay in these early centuries of state formation, when ambitious chieftains and imperial loyalists first took up arms to shape the destiny of their island nation. The age of the sword was dawning, and with it would come centuries of warfare, honor, and sacrifice that would define Japan's feudal era. The Yamato state solidified its power through a combination of military might and spiritual authority. By the 7th century, the imperial court had established itself as the dominant political force across Japan's main islands. Emperor Tenji implemented the Taika reforms in 645 CE, modeled after China's Tang dynasty bureaucracy. These sweeping changes abolished private land ownership, instituted a centralized tax system, and created Japan's first permanent capital at Nara. The reforms aimed to strengthen imperial control, but also sowed the seeds of future conflict by creating a class of disaffected provincial nobles. Military expeditions to northern Honshu expanded Yamato territory, while creating a need for permanent frontier garrisons. The imperial government established the Jinjufu system, stationing warrior clans in strategic locations to defend against the Emishur people who resisted Yamato rule. These frontier warriors developed specialized cavalry skills to combat the emishi's guerrilla tactics, foreshadowing the mounted archery that would become synonymous with samurai warfare. The government rewarded successful commanders with land grants and court titles, creating a new military aristocracy. The Nara period, 710 to 794, saw the completion of Japan's first permanent capital at Haijokyo, modern Nara. The city's grid layout copied Chang'an, the Tang capital, with broad avenues leading to imposing government compounds and Buddhist temples. The massive Todaiji temple complex housed the 15-meter-tall bronze statue of Buddha Vairocana, demonstrating the court's embrace of Buddhism as a state religion. However, the growing political influence of Buddhist monasteries created tensions with the imperial government, contributing to the decision to move the capital to Heian-kyo, Kyoto, in 794. The Heian period, 794-1185, marked both the zenith of imperial court culture and the beginning of its decline. Emperor Kamu's new capital became a masterpiece of urban planning, surrounded by mountains on three sides and bisected by the Kumo River. The court developed an intricate system of ranks and titles, with the Fujiwara clan dominating through strategic marriages to imperial heirs. While aristocrats composed poetry and admired cherry blossoms in the capital, provincial governors and military clans grew increasingly powerful in the countryside. The imperial government's land redistribution system began collapsing as powerful families accumulated private estates called shon. These tax-exempt holdings created parallel power structures outside imperial control. Provincial warrior clans, many descended from imperial princes sent to govern remote areas, developed into semi-autonomous feudal lords. The Taira and Minamoto clans emerged as the two most powerful military families, both claiming descent from imperial lineage. The 10th century saw the imperial court increasingly rely on provincial warriors to maintain order. Bandits roamed the countryside while pirates plagued coastal waters. The government created the posts of Chinjafu shogun, commander-in-chief of the defense of the north, and Tsuabushi, bandit pursuit officials, appointing warrior nobles to these positions. These early military governors gained valuable administrative experience while building networks of loyal retainers. In 935, Taira no Masakato launched Japan's first major samurai rebellion. Controlling much of the Kanto region, Masakato declared himself the new emperor, before being defeated by government forces. His revolt demonstrated both the growing power of provincial warriors and the imperial court's weakening control. Similar uprisings by the Taira and Fujiwara clans followed throughout the 10th and 11th centuries. The imperial court's attempt to play rival clans against each other backfired spectacularly during the Hagen Rebellion of 1156. A succession dispute between Emperor Go-Shirakawa and retired Emperor Sotoku escalated into open warfare between the Taira and Minamoto clans. Though the rebellion lasted only one night, it marked the beginning of direct military involvement in court politics. The Taira emerged victorious, with Kayamori becoming the first warrior to rise to the highest ranks of imperial government. Taira no Kayamori's rise to power reached its peak in 1180, when he placed his infant grandson Antoku on the throne. The Minamoto clan, exiled after the Heiji Rebellion of 1160, saw their chance to strike back. Minamoto no Yoritamo, spared as a boy after his father's death, had spent years building alliances in the Kanto region. When Prince Machihito issued a call to arms against the Taira, Yoritamo answered with a growing coalition of eastern warriors. The Genpei War, 1180 to 1185, pitted the Taira, Haika, against the Minamoto, Genji, in a nationwide conflict that would reshape Japanese history. Early Taira victories gave way to Minamoto advances, as Yoritamo's brothers Yoshitsun and Noriyori proved brilliant tacticians. The war's climax came at the naval battle of Dan no Yura, where the Minamoto destroyed the Taira fleet. According to legend, the child emperor Antoku perished when his grandmother plunged with him into the sea rather than surrender. Yoritamo established his military government at Kamakura, far from the intrigues of the imperial court. In 1192, he received the title of Sei Taishogun, barbarian subduing great general, formalizing the shogunate system that would dominate Japan for nearly 700 years. The Kamakura shogunate created a new feudal order where loyalty to military lords superseded traditional court hierarchies. Samurai became a distinct social class with defined privileges and responsibilities. The shogunate implemented the Jido system, appointing land stewards to manage estates nationwide. These positions became hereditary, creating a network of warrior families bound to the shogunate. The Gokunin system formalized the lord-vassal relationship, with warriors swearing personal allegiance to the shogun in exchange for land rights. Yoritomo's legal code, the Gozaibai Shikamoku, established samurai courts to handle warrior disputes separately from imperial law. Buddhism evolved to meet samurai needs during this period. The austere Zen sects gained popularity among warriors for their emphasis on discipline and meditation. The Pure Land schools offered salvation through simple faith, appealing to common soldiers. Warrior monks from temples like Inryakuji and Kafukuji became formidable military forces in their own right, often clashing with the shogunate. The Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281 tested the Kamakura shogunate's strength. Facing unfamiliar battlefield tactics and explosive projectiles, the samurai adapted quickly. Though outnumbered, they repelled both invasions with help from timely typhoons that became known as divine winds, kamikaze. The victories strengthened the shogunate's prestige, but created financial strain from unpaid rewards to defending warriors. Economic pressures and succession disputes weakened the Kamakura shogunate in the early 14th century. Emperor Go-Daigo saw an opportunity to restore direct imperial rule, launching the Kenmu Restoration in 1333. With help from disaffected samurai like Ashikaga Takauji and Nido Yashisada, Go-Daigo overthrew the shogunate. His attempt to govern without warrior support proved short-lived. Ashikaga Takauji turned against the emperor, establishing the rival northern court while Go-Daigo fled to Yoshino, beginning the Nambokucho period of divided courts. The Ashikaga shogunate, 1336 to 1573, moved the military capital back to Kyoto but never achieved the centralized control of its predecessor. Regional warlords called Shugo daimyo grew increasingly independent, setting the stage for Japan's violent warring states period. The Yunnan War, 1467 to 1477, reduced Kyoto to ashes as rival samurai factions battled for control of the shogunate. With central authority collapsed, provincial daimyo built castle towns and fielded massive peasant armies in their struggle for territorial dominance. Samurai culture flourished despite the constant warfare. Zen-inspired arts like rock gardens, tea ceremony, and ink painting reached their height. The warrior code of Bushido began taking shape, emphasizing loyalty, courage, and honor. Sword smithing became a revered art form, with master smiths like Masamune creating legendary blades. The turbulent 15th and 16th centuries would produce some of Japan's most famous warriors and set the stage for its final unification under three extraordinary leaders. The Heian period, 794-1185, dawned with Emperor Kemu's establishment of a new capital at Heian-kyo, present-day Kyoto. The carefully planned city stretched in an orderly grid between the Kumo and Katsura rivers, its wide avenues lined with vermilion-pillared palaces and Buddhist temples whose curved roofs seemed to float above the bustling streets. This would become the imperial capital for over 1,000 years, its very name, Heian, meaning peace and tranquility, though this peace would prove fragile. At court, an elaborate system of ranks and titles dictated every aspect of aristocratic life. The Fujiwara clan rose to dominance through shrewd political marriages, installing their daughters as imperial consorts and serving as regents for child emperors. Fujiwara no Michinaga, the most powerful of his line, boasted, "This world, I think, is indeed my world," after seeing 4 of his daughters marry emperors. The regency system created an intricate web of obligations where courtiers vied for prestige through poetry competitions, incense judging ceremonies, and the subtle art of calligraphy. The development of kana script liberated Japanese literature from Chinese forms, giving birth to a golden age of courtly writing. Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji chronicled the romantic intrigues of fictional Prince Genji, creating the world's first psychological novel. Sei Shonagon's Pillow Book captured the ephemeral beauty of court life with its lists and observations, from things that quicken the heart to hateful things. These works established aesthetic ideals like Mono no Aware, the pathos of things, and Miyabi, courtly refinement, that would influence Japanese culture for centuries. While the nobility indulged in aesthetic pursuits, the provinces simmered with unrest. The imperial government's Ritsuryo legal system, modeled after China's Tang dynasty, proved ill-suited to Japan's decentralized geography. As the tax system faltered, powerful families established private estates, shown, exempt from government levies. Provincial governors often remained in the capital, delegating their duties to local deputies who frequently abused their power. Bandits and pirates operated with impunity as central authority weakened. The imperial court increasingly relied on provincial warrior clans to maintain order. Two powerful military families emerged, the Minamoto, also called Genji, and Taira, Haika, both claiming descent from imperial princes. The Minamoto established their power base in the Kanto Plain, while the Taira dominated western Japan. These clans developed networks of armed retainers, skilled in mounted archery and swordsmanship. The government granted them military titles like Kabishi, police commissioners, to legitimize their authority. In 935, Taira no Masakato launched Japan's first major samurai rebellion, declaring himself new emperor after conquering much of the Kanto region. His audacious revolt shocked the court, though he was ultimately defeated and beheaded. His head was brought to Kyoto where, according to legend, it continued to gnash its teeth in anger. Masakato became both a cautionary tale and folk hero, his spirit said to haunt Tokyo to this day. The warrior clan's involvement in court politics reached a turning point during the Hagen Rebellion of 1156. A succession dispute between Emperor Go-Shirakawa and retired Emperor Sutoku escalated into open warfare when both factions called on the Minamoto and Taira for support. The brief but bloody conflict saw warriors fighting within the capital's sacred precincts, violating long-held taboos. The Taira emerged victorious under Kayamori, who began consolidating unprecedented power. Taira no Kayamori's ascent marked a seismic shift in Japanese politics. After suppressing the Heiji Rebellion of 1160, he systematically placed relatives in key government positions. His daughter Tokuko became imperial consort, and their son would ascend the throne as Emperor Antoku. Kayamori's domination of both military and court affairs alienated many, including exiled Minamoto leaders and powerful Buddhist monasteries. The simmering tensions erupted in 1180 when Prince Machihito, passed over for succession, issued a call to arms against the Taira. Minamoto no Yoritamo, whose father had been killed in the Heiji Rebellion, answered the call from his eastern stronghold. Thus began the Genpei War, a nationwide conflict that would reshape Japan's political landscape. The war's early stages favored the Taira, who controlled the capital and imperial legitimacy. But the Minamoto's strategic brilliance, particularly Yoritamo's younger half-brother Yoshitsun, turned the tide. Yoshitsun's daring tactics at the Battle of Ichi-no-Tani in 1184 became legendary, leading a cavalry charge down near vertical cliffs to rout the Taira forces. The war reached its climax at Dan-no-Yura in 1185, a naval battle where the Minamoto annihilated the Taira fleet. The child Emperor Antoku drowned with his grandmother, who chose death over capture, taking the imperial regalia with them to the sea bottom. Yoritamo established his military government in Kamakura, far from the intrigues of the imperial court. In 1192, he received the title of shogun, formalizing warrior rule that would last nearly 7 centuries. The Kamakura shogunate created a new feudal order where military loyalty superseded courtly rank. Yoritamo's legal code established separate courts for warrior disputes, recognizing samurai as a distinct legal class. The shogunate appointed Jito, land stewards, and shugo military governors to administer provinces, creating a nationwide network of warrior governance. The Gokunin system formalized lord-vassal bonds, with land grants exchanged for military service. This decentralized system proved remarkably durable, surviving even the Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281. The Heian period's legacy endured even as political power shifted to the warriors. Courtly aesthetics continued to influence samurai culture, while the imperial institution remained as a sacred symbol of legitimacy. The tension between refined court culture and martial values would shape Japanese society for generations, finding expression in everything from no theater to tea ceremony. The stage was now set for Japan's feudal age, where the sword would rule as surely as the brush once had. The Genpei War's embers still smoldered when Minamoto no Yoritamo began consolidating his victory. The Taira clan's destruction left a power vacuum that Yoritamo filled with ruthless efficiency. His first act was to eliminate potential rivals, including his own brother Yoshitsun, whose battlefield brilliance had secured their triumph. The famous warrior became a fugitive, hunted across Japan until his dramatic seppuku at Koromagawa. Yoritamo's paranoia created a template for future shoguns: trust no one, especially family. Kamakura became the center of Japan's first warrior government. Unlike the imperial capital's ornate splendor, Yoritamo's headquarters embodied pragmatic militarism. Simple wooden buildings housed the shogunate's bureaucracy, where former imperial officials worked alongside hardened samurai to create a new legal system. The Gozaibai Shikamoku established 51 articles governing warrior conduct, land disputes, and criminal punishments. Most revolutionary was Article 3. A Gokunin shall not be punished without a hearing. For the first time, warriors had legal rights independent of court aristocracy. The shogunate's power rested on two pillars, the Jido and Shugo systems. Jido, or land stewards, collected taxes and managed estates confiscated from defeated Terra loyalists. These positions became hereditary, creating a new warrior aristocracy tied to the shogunate. Shugo served as provincial constables, responsible for maintaining order and mustering troops. Together, these officials formed a nationwide network of military governance that bypassed the imperial court. Yoritomo's death in 1199 triggered a succession crisis that revealed the shogunate's fragility. His widow Hojo Masako, the nun shogun, orchestrated a bloodless coup that placed her family in control. The Hojo regents ruled behind puppet shoguns, a system that lasted over a century. Masako's political acumen became legendary. When warriors questioned female leadership, she appeared before them in full nun's habit, declaring, "This head that once bore a child is not afraid to be cut off." Samurai culture crystallized during the Kamakura period. Mounted archery remained the premier martial skill, practiced at shrines like Tsuragaka Hakamengu. The Abusame ceremony, where riders shot targets at full gallop, blended Shinto ritual with military training. Swords evolved from straight blades to the iconic curved tachi, better suited for cavalry combat. Armor became more sophisticated, with lacquered iron scales laced together in distinctive patterns. The warrior ethos found expression in Gunki Monogatari, war tales like Heike Monogatari that blended history with Buddhist themes of impermanence. Buddhism adapted to serve warrior needs. Zen monasteries offered mental discipline through zazen meditation, while Pure Land sects promised salvation to those dying in battle. Warrior monks became a formidable political force. The Enryakuji Temple on Mount Hai maintained an army that even shoguns feared. When the Hojo regent Tokiyori sought to curb their power, the monks descended on Kyoto in protest, their Makashi palanquins symbolizing divine wrath. The shogunate faced its greatest test in 1274, when Kublai Khan's Mongol Chinese-Korean armada appeared off Hakata Bay. The invaders employed terrifying new tactics, explosive projectiles, coordinated troop movements, and poisoned arrows. Samurai accustomed to ritualized combat found themselves outmatched. Only a timely typhoon, later called kamikaze or divine wind, saved Japan from conquest. When the Mongols returned in 1281 with an even larger fleet, the shogunate had prepared coastal defenses. After 7 weeks of brutal fighting, another typhoon annihilated the invasion force. Victory came at tremendous cost. The shogunate lacked lands to reward defending warriors, creating widespread discontent. Economic strain worsened as trade with Song China collapsed following the Mongol conquests. Meanwhile, the imperial court saw an opportunity to reassert authority. Emperor Go-Daigo, a scholar and poet, dreamed of restoring direct imperial rule. His 1331 Kenmu restoration attempt failed initially, but planted seeds of rebellion. The shogunate's downfall came from an unexpected quarter. Ashikaga Takauji, sent to crush Go-Daigo's rebellion, instead switched sides. Kamakura fell in 1333, its regent family committing mass suicide in the ruins of Toshoji Temple. Go-Daigo's short-lived restoration government alienated warriors by favoring court nobles. Takauji turned against the emperor, installing a rival imperial line while establishing his own shogunate in Kyoto's Muromachi district. The Ashikaga shogunate never achieved Kamakura's centralized control. Regional warlords, Shugo daimyo, grew increasingly autonomous, some controlling multiple provinces. The shogunate's authority relied on balancing these powerful clans against each other, a delicate equilibrium that collapsed during the Unin War, 1467 to 1477. What began as a succession dispute between the Hosokawa and Yamana clans escalated into a decade-long conflict that reduced Kyoto to ashes. Samurai warfare transformed dramatically during this period. Massed infantry, a shigeru, armed with spears and arquebus, replaced aristocratic cavalry. Castle construction evolved from simple wooden forts to complex stone-walled compounds with multiple baileys. The chaotic Sengoku period, 1467 to 1615, saw nearly constant warfare as daimyo vied for supremacy. Some, like Takeda Shingen and Yasuji Kenshin, became legendary for their battlefield prowess and strategic brilliance. Amidst the carnage, samurai culture flourished. Zen aesthetics influenced everything from architecture to tea ceremony. The Karasansui, dry landscape, garden at Ryoanji, with its 15 carefully placed rocks, embodied the warrior's search for clarity amidst chaos. No theater developed under Kanami and Zimi, its masked performances exploring themes of loss and transcendence that resonated with battle-hardened warriors. The Ashikaga shogunate's impotence became glaringly apparent during the 16th century. Portuguese traders arriving in 1543 introduced firearms that revolutionized warfare. Jesuit missionaries followed, converting some daimyo to Christianity. The shogunate could only watch as regional lords like Oda Nobunaga began the process of reunification through sheer military might. By the time Nobunaga entered Kyoto in 1568, the shogun was little more than a ceremonial figurehead. Nobunaga's ruthless campaigns demonstrated how far samurai warfare had evolved from its Heian origins. His use of massed arquebusiers at Nagashino, 1575, annihilated the Takeda cavalry, once considered invincible. Castle architecture reached new heights with Azuchi Castle's 7-story keep, a symbol of power visible for miles. Yet Nobunaga's ambition outstripped his lifespan. In 1582, he died by his own retainer's hand at Hinnoji Temple. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's sandal-bearer turned supreme commander, completed the reunification. His 1588 sword hunt disarmed peasants, formalizing the samurai as a privileged warrior class. The 1591 separation edict froze social mobility, creating rigid class divisions that would last until the 19th century. Hideyoshi's disastrous invasions of Korea, 1592 to 1598, marked the last gasp of medieval samurai warfare before Tokugawa Ieyasu imposed lasting peace. The Genpei War's legacy endured through these transformations. The Minamoto and Taira became archetypes in countless kabuki plays and woodblock prints. Their battles were memorialized in shrine festivals and no dramas. Even as warfare evolved from mounted archery to massed gunpowder armies, the samurai's self-image remained rooted in those early conflicts. The code of Bushido that formalized in the Edo period drew heavily on the loyalty and sacrifice displayed during Japan's age of civil wars. When the last samurai rebelled against modernization in 1877, they invoked the spirit of Yoshitsune and his tragic end, proof that 12 centuries after the Genpei War, its ghost still walked Japan. The Kamakura shogunate emerged from the ashes of the Genpei War as a revolutionary new power structure. Minamoto no Yoritomo's victory over the Taira clan in 1185 didn't just change the balance of power, it redefined the nature of governance in Japan. The imperial court remained in Kyoto, preserving its ceremonial functions and divine legitimacy, but real authority now resided in the warrior government established at Kamakura. This eastern capital, far removed from the aristocratic intrigues of the imperial court, developed as a pragmatic military headquarters where decisions were made based on battlefield realities rather than courtly precedents. Yoritomo's first challenge was consolidating control over the victorious Minamoto forces. His ruthless elimination of potential rivals, including his own half-brother Yoshitsune, demonstrated the shogunate's uncompromising approach to maintaining power. The famous scene at Koramagawa, where Yoshitsune composed his death poem before committing seppuku, became an enduring symbol of warrior tragedy. Yoritomo's paranoia wasn't unfounded. The very system he created rewarded loyalty, but could just as easily foster rebellion among ambitious vassals. This tension between feudal obligation and personal ambition would characterize samurai politics for centuries. The shogunate's administrative innovations laid the foundation for Japan's feudal system. Yoritomo established the Samurai Dokoro, Board of Retainers, to oversee his warrior vassals, the Mandokoro as the main administrative organ, and the Manchujo to handle judicial matters. These institutions gave the warrior class its first independent bureaucracy separate from imperial government structures. The Gozaibai Shikamoka legal code, promulgated in 1232, formalized warrior privileges and obligations. Its 51 articles covered everything from land disputes to criminal punishments, with particular emphasis on maintaining loyalty between lords and vassals. Article 35's declaration that a Gokunin should not be punished without proper hearing represented a revolutionary concept. legal rights for warriors independent of aristocratic whim. Land distribution formed the economic backbone of the shogunate. Yoritomo rewarded loyal followers with appointments as jito, land stewards, on estates confiscated from defeated Terra supporters. These positions, which entitled holders to a portion of the land's produce, became hereditary and created a new warrior aristocracy. The Shugo system placed military governors in each province to maintain order and muster troops when needed. Together, these positions allowed the shogunate to project power nationwide without completely dismantling the existing imperial landholding system. However, this dual structure also sowed seeds of future conflict between shogunate appointees and traditional estate holders. The Hojo clan's rise to power following Yoritomo's death in 1199 demonstrated the shogunate's evolving nature. Yoritomo's widow Hojo Masako, known as the Nun Shogun, orchestrated a political coup that placed her family in control as regents for figurehead shoguns. Her famous confrontation with reluctant vassals, appearing before them in nun's habit and declaring her willingness to die for the regime, became legendary. The Hojo regents proved capable administrators, refining the shogunate's legal system and maintaining stability through the Jokyu War of 1221, when they crushed an imperial attempt to restore direct rule. Samurai culture developed distinctive characteristics during the Kamakura period. Mounted archery remained the premier martial skill, practiced at shrines like Tsuragaka Hakamangu in elaborate Yabusame ceremonies that combined Shinto ritual with military training. Sword technology advanced significantly, with smiths developing the distinctive curved tachi blades better suited for cavalry combat. Armor evolved into more sophisticated forms, with small iron scales, kozane, lacquered and laced together into flexible protective suits. The warrior ethos found expression in Gunki Monogatari, war tales like Haika Monogatari that blended historical events with Buddhist themes of impermanence and karma. Buddhism underwent significant transformations to meet warrior needs. Zen Buddhism, introduced from China, gained favor among samurai for its emphasis on discipline and mental focus. The Rinzai sect's connection with the Hojo regents led to the establishment of prominent temples like Kenshoji in Kamakura. Pure Land Buddhism, with its promise of salvation through faith alone, appealed to common warriors facing death in battle. The militant monastic complexes like Inraya Kaji on Mount Hai continued to wield significant political power, their warrior monks, Sohei, capable of intimidating even the shogunate. The shogunate faced its ultimate test when Kublai Khan's Mongol Empire turned its attention to Japan. The 1274 invasion force that landed at Hakata Bay introduced Japanese warriors to terrifying new combat methods, massed infantry tactics, explosive projectiles, and poisoned arrows. Samurai accustomed to ritualized single combat found themselves outmaneuvered. Only a timely typhoon that destroyed much of the Mongol fleet saved Kamakura from catastrophe. When the Mongols returned in 1281 with an even larger armada, the shogunate had prepared coastal defenses and coordinated warrior responses. After 7 weeks of brutal fighting, another typhoon, the original Divine Wind, or kamikaze, annihilated the invasion force. Victory against the Mongols came at tremendous cost. The shogunate lacked sufficient lands to properly reward warriors who had defended the country, creating widespread discontent. Economic strain increased as trade with Song China collapsed following the Mongol conquests. The Hojo regents attempted reforms, including debt cancellation measures that alienated merchant creditors, but failed to address systemic problems. Meanwhile, the imperial court saw an opportunity to reassert its authority. Emperor Go-Daigo's 1331 Kenmu restoration attempt initially failed, but inspired growing opposition to the shogunate. The final blow came when Ashikaga Takauji, sent to crush the rebellion, instead switched sides. Kamakura fell in 1333, its last regent committing suicide with hundreds of followers at Tashoji Temple. The Hojo's dramatic mass suicide marked the end of an era, one that had seen the samurai class rise from provincial enforcers to national rulers. The Kamakura shogunate's legacy endured long after its fall. Its legal and administrative innovations provided models for subsequent warrior governments. The lord-vassal relationships it formalized became the foundation of Japanese feudalism. Culturally, it established warrior aesthetics that would influence everything from no theater to tea ceremony. Perhaps most significantly, it proved that Japan could be governed by military power rather than imperial decree, a reality that would shape the nation's politics for the next 7 centuries. Even as the Ashikaga shogunate rose from Kamakura's ashes, the earlier regime's influence persisted. Future shoguns would study the Hojo regents' administrative techniques while avoiding their mistakes. The Mongol invasions entered national mythology as evidence of divine protection, a theme resurrected during World War II with the kamikaze pilots. And the image of the loyal, disciplined Kamakura-era warrior became the gold standard against which later samurai measured themselves, even as the nature of warfare and society changed beyond recognition. In this way, the Kamakura shogunate didn't just rule Japan for 141 years. It helped define what Japan would become. The Ashikaga shogunate rose from the ruins of Kamakura, but its foundations were unstable from the beginning. Ashikaga Takauji's betrayal of both the Hojo regents and Emperor Go-Daigo created a legitimacy crisis that would haunt his dynasty for generations. Unlike Yoritomo's eastern capital at Kamakura, Takauji established his shogunate in Kyoto's Muromachi district, a symbolic return to imperial territory that reflected the Ashikaga's need to balance warrior rule with courtly traditions. This proximity to the imperial court would prove both a strength and a fatal weakness. Takauji's rivalry with his younger brother Tadayoshi mirrored the broader tensions tearing at Japan's social fabric. Their conflict escalated into open warfare in 1350, setting a pattern of familial strife that would repeat throughout the shogunate's history. The country divided between northern and southern courts, with rival emperors claiming legitimacy, while warlords exploited the chaos to expand their domains. This Nambokucho period lasted 56 years, its resolution in 1392 doing little to strengthen central authority. The compromise that brought the imperial lines together left provincial daimyo virtually autonomous in their territories. The third shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, represented both the zenith and the turning point of Ashikaga power. His golden pavilion Kinkakuji, covered in gold leaf and reflected in a tranquil pond, symbolized the shogunate's cultural brilliance and financial extravagance in equal measure. Yoshimitsu negotiated an end to the imperial schism and received recognition from Ming China as King of Japan, a title that horrified the imperial court but demonstrated his international stature. Yet his lavish spending drained the shogunate's coffers, while his centralizing policies alienated regional lords. When he died suddenly in 1408, the fragile balance he maintained collapsed. Samurai culture underwent profound changes during the Muromachi period. The chaotic warfare of the Nambokucho years eroded traditional combat norms, as massed infantry began challenging the dominance of mounted aristocrats. The Yunnan War, 1467 to 1477, completed this transformation, reducing Kyoto to smoldering ruins while barely involving the shogun at all. For 11 years, the Hosokawa and Yamana clans battled through the streets of the capital, their Shigeru foot soldiers looting imperial palaces and burning temples with equal abandon. When the fighting finally ended, the 8th shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa retired to his silver pavilion Ginkakuji, pursuing tea ceremony and moon viewing while warlords carved up the country. Regional daimyo developed into true feudal lords during this Sengoku period. Men like Takeda Shingen of Kai and Yasuji Kenshin of Ekigo ruled their domains as independent kingdoms, maintaining armies and administering justice without reference to Kyoto. Their massive stone castles, like Maruoka and Matsumoto, represented both military strongholds and symbols of local authority. The shogunate's authority became purely nominal. When the 15th shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki sought to challenge Oda Nobunaga in 1573, his deposition came swiftly and without significant resistance. Cultural developments flourished amidst the political chaos. Zen Buddhism reached new heights of influence, shaping everything from ink painting to garden design. The dry landscape garden at Ryoanji, with its 15 carefully placed rocks, embodied the era's aesthetic of suggestion over statement. No theater matured under Kanami and his son Zimi, its mass performances exploring themes of loss and transcendence that resonated with war-torn audiences. Tea ceremony evolved from Chinese-inspired luxury to wabi-sabi simplicity, particularly in the thatched tea hut designed by Sun no Rikyu at the order of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Economic changes transformed Japanese society. The collapse of the Shon system gave way to market economies centered on castle towns. Merchant guilds, ZA, gained increasing influence, particularly in Sakai and Hakata, where wealthy traders operated virtually autonomously. Portuguese traders arriving in 1543 introduced firearms that revolutionized warfare, while Jesuit missionaries began converting daimyo in western Japan. The shogunate proved powerless to control these developments. When the Otomo clan of Bungo converted to Christianity in 1578, they did so without consulting Kyoto. The Ashikaga shogunate's final decades were a slow fade into irrelevance. As Oda Nobunaga marched toward unification in the 1560s-70s, he kept the last Ashikaga shoguns as figureheads before discarding them entirely. Yet the Muromachi period's cultural legacy endured. The Kano school of painting, the refined aesthetics of Yoshimasa's Higashiyama culture, and the architectural innovations visible in temples like Kinkakuji all outlasted the political structure that fostered them. Even the shogunate's weakness contributed to Japan's eventual reunification, as regional lords developed the administrative skills necessary to govern larger territories. By the time Tokugawa Ieyasu established his shogunate in 1603, the Ashikaga were remembered more for their cultural achievements than political prowess. Their 2.5-century rule had seen Japan transform from a medieval society to an early modern one, its warriors evolving from horse-riding aristocrats to gun-wielding administrators. The Muromachi period's great contradiction, brilliant art flourishing amidst terrible violence, became its defining characteristic, a testament to the human capacity for creation even in times of destruction. In the end, the Ashikaga's greatest legacy wasn't their failed governance, but the cultural flowering that occurred despite it. The Sengoku period erupted from the ashes of the Unin War, a time when the phrase Gekukujo, the low overthrowing the high, became the defining principle of Japanese society. Provincial warlords, smelling the weakness of the Ashikaga shogunate, carved out independent domains where traditional hierarchies meant nothing compared to military might. In the mountainous province of Kai, the Takeda clan developed the feared cavalry units that would dominate battlefields for generations. Their legendary general Takeda Shingen perfected the Furinkazan strategy, swift as wind, silent as forest, fierce as fire, immovable as mountain, that crushed enemies at battles like Mikadagahara. Meanwhile, in Ekigo province, Yasuji Kenshin, the dragon of Ekigo, built a warrior cult around the Buddhist god of war Bishamonten. His rivalry with Shingen at Kawanakajima produced 5 legendary battles where tactical brilliance met raw, primal fury on the flooded plains of northern Shinano. Castle architecture underwent revolutionary changes as daimyo sought to solidify their territorial control. The simple mountain fortresses of earlier eras evolved into sprawling complexes like Odawara Castle, where the Hojo clan resisted sieges for generations. Massive stone bases replaced wooden palisades, while concentric moats and gate systems created killing zones for defending arquebusiers. Within these castles, new forms of governance emerged. The Kanban system organized samurai into administrative units, while land surveys like the Taiko Kenchi rationalized tax collection. The warlord Date Masamune, the one-eyed dragon of Sendai, typified the era's ruthless pragmatism when he reportedly ordered his own father's assassination to secure the clan's succession. Portuguese traders arriving on Tanegashima Island in 1543 introduced firearms that permanently altered Japanese warfare. Within decades, skilled gunsmiths like Kunitomo were producing matchlock arquebus superior to European models. At the 1575 Battle of Nagashino, Oda Nobunaga demonstrated firearms' devastating potential by deploying 3,000 arquebusiers behind wooden palisades. Their rotating volleys annihilated the legendary Takeda cavalry. Yet traditional weapons still had their place. The 7-foot-long Nodachi greatswords wielded by Otani Yoshitsune's warriors at Sekigahara could cleave through multiple opponents in single strokes. Religious institutions became enmeshed in the era's violence. The Iko-Iki, militant peasant leagues loyal to the Jodo Shinshu Buddhist sect, established independent theocracies in Kaga province and Osaka. Their Ishiyama Honganji fortress withstood an 11-year siege before falling to Nobunaga's forces. Warrior monks from Mount Hai and Nagoroji temples fielded armies equipped with their own firearms, forcing warlords to consider spiritual authority alongside military power. When Nobunaga finally burned in Ryukaji to the ground in 1571, the smoke could be seen from Kyoto, a brutal declaration that no institution stood above the sword. The era's social upheaval created opportunities for those outside traditional power structures. Peasant uprisings, Iki, became frequent occurrences, with some villages successfully negotiating autonomous charters. Women like Tachibana Jinchiyo inherited warlord status, leading clans into battle while managing complex alliances. Even foreigners found roles. The African warrior Yasuke served as Nobunaga's trusted retainer, while Jesuit missionaries like Louis Froys became important cultural intermediaries. The merchant class flourished as warfare created demand for weapons, supplies, and financing. The House of Mitsui began as sake brewers supplying warlord armies. Cultural expression flourished amidst the carnage. No theater reached new heights under Kanami and Zimi's successors, while kabuki had its origins in the provocative dances of Izumo no Okuni. Tea ceremony evolved into a sophisticated political tool. Nobunaga and Hideyoshi both used coveted tea utensils as rewards and diplomatic gifts. The Momoyama period's flamboyant aesthetics found expression in gold-leafed castle interiors and lavish screen paintings depicting falcons and tigers, symbols of warlord power. Even in death, the daimyo sought to impress, constructing elaborate mausoleums like the Tokugawas at Nikko. The period's climax came at the 1600 Battle of Sekigahara, where Tokugawa Ieyasu's eastern forces crushed the western coalition loyal to Toyotomi Hideori. The fighting raged through thick fog and torrential rain, with entire armies changing sides mid-battle. When the dust settled, Ieyasu redistributed over 6 million koku of land to his supporters, the largest reallocation of territory in Japanese history. His victory didn't just decide a battle, it ended an era. The Warring States period's final gasp came 20 years later at Osaka Castle, where the last Toyotomi loyalists perished in flames rather than submit to Tokugawa rule. Yet the Sengoku period's legacy endured long after the fighting stopped. The administrative systems developed by warlords became templates for Tokugawa governance. The Bushido Code crystallized from centuries of battlefield experience into a formal ethical system. Even the era's chaos left its mark. The phrase Sengoku Jidai would later be invoked during Japan's tumultuous 19th century modernization, a reminder that the country had survived fragmentation before. Most importantly, the period proved Japan's remarkable capacity for reinvention, as a fractured collection of warring provinces transformed into one of the early modern world's most centralized states. The warlords' dreams of unification ultimately succeeded, but at a cost none could have imagined when the first shots of the Unin War rang out across Kyoto. The three great unifiers emerged from the chaos of the Sengoku period, like successive waves reshaping Japan's political shoreline. Oda Nobunaga, the first and most ruthless of the trio, began as a minor daimyo in Owari province with a reputation for eccentric behavior. His early victory at the Battle of Okahazama in 1560 revealed the tactical genius that would characterize his campaigns, attacking a numerically superior Imagawa force during a thunderstorm when their guards were down. Nobunaga's rise was built on three revolutionary principles: meritocracy over pedigree, innovation over tradition, and total war over ritualized combat. His black-clad armies marched under banners bearing his personal motto, "Rule the realm by force." Nobunaga's military innovations transformed Japanese warfare. He was among the first to mass-produce firearms after seeing their potential at the 1543 Tanegashima demonstration. At Nagashino in 1575, his 3,000 arquebusiers firing in rotating volleys behind wooden barricades annihilated the legendary Takeda cavalry, a battle that marked the end of traditional samurai warfare. His castle at Azuchi, completed in 1579, broke with centuries of architectural tradition with its 7-story keep and lavish interior decorations featuring gold leaf and Chinese motifs. More fortress than palace, Azuchi Castle became both military headquarters and symbol of a new order. The warlord's administrative reforms proved equally revolutionary. He instituted free markets, Rikichi-Rakuza, to stimulate economic growth and conducted comprehensive land surveys to rationalize taxation. His policy of Tenkafubu, unifying the realm through military might, extended to brutal suppression of religious institutions that challenged his authority. The 1571 destruction of Enryakuji Temple complex on Mount Hai, where thousands of monks were slaughtered and centuries-old buildings burned, sent shockwaves across Japan. Nobunaga's relationship with Christianity was pragmatic. He tolerated Jesuit missionaries as counterweights to Buddhist power and appreciated European technology, even wearing a cassock during formal audiences. Toyotomi Hideyoshi's rise from peasant foot soldier to imperial regent embodied the era's social mobility. Known as the monkey for his simian features, Hideyoshi began as Nobunaga's sandal-bearer before demonstrating exceptional military and diplomatic skills. His 1582 lightning march to avenge Nobunaga's death at Honnoji, covering nearly 200 kilometers in 5 days, secured his position as successor. Hideyoshi completed Nobunaga's unification through both brilliant campaigns and shrewd alliances, culminating in the 1590 siege of Odawara Castle that brought the Kanto region under his control. Hideyoshi's domestic policies created the framework for early modern Japan. The 1588 sword hunt disarmed peasants, formalizing the warrior-peasant divide that would characterize the Edo period. His nationwide land survey, Taiko Kenshi, established standardized measurements for rice production that became the basis of feudal economics. The 1591 separation edict froze social mobility, prohibiting samurai from becoming farmers or townspeople from changing occupations. These measures aimed to stabilize society after a century of upheaval, though they ironically closed the very paths to advancement that had enabled Hideyoshi's own rise. The regent's foreign ambitions culminated in the disastrous invasions of Korea, 1592 to 1598. Initially successful, his forces reached Pyongyang within months. The campaign bogged down against Korean naval superiority and Ming Chinese intervention. The conflict introduced new military technologies like turtle ships and European-style plate armor adapted by Japanese smiths, but drained resources and lives on an unprecedented scale. Hideyoshi's death in 1598 spared him from witnessing the complete withdrawal of his forces, though his dream of conquering China died with him. Tokugawa Ieyasu represented the culmination of the unification process. A former hostage turned ally of both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, Ieyasu bided his time in the fertile Kanto plain, while others exhausted themselves in conflict. His victory at Sekigahara in 1600, secured through last-minute defections by key allies, marked the true end of the Sengoku period. The battle's aftermath saw the most extensive land redistribution in Japanese history, with over 6 million koku of rice land changing hands to reward loyalists and punish opponents. Ieyasu's political genius became apparent in the subtle but profound ways he structured his shogunate. Unlike Nobunaga's brute force or Hideyoshi's charismatic authority, Ieyasu built systems that would endure for centuries. The 1615 laws for the military houses, Byukushohado, codified daimyo obligations while restricting castle construction and military preparations. His alternate attendance system, Sankenkotai, required lords to maintain expensive residences in Edo and spend alternating years there, keeping potential rivals both close and financially drained. The siege of Osaka Castle, 1614 to 1615, eliminated the last Toyotomi loyalists and cemented Tokugawa dominance. Ieyasu's manipulation of the castle's outer defenses during the winter campaign demonstrated his mastery of both military and psychological warfare. The summer campaign's final assault saw the last great samurai charge, Sanada Yukimura's desperate breakout attempt that nearly reached Ieyasu's command post before being cut down. With Hideyori's suicide in the burning castle keep, an era truly ended. Cultural developments during this transitional period reflected the changing times. Nobunaga patronized the flamboyant Azuchi Momoyama style seen in Kano Idoka's gold leaf screens. Hideyoshi's tea-master son No Rikyu perfected the wabi-sabi aesthetic before being ordered to commit suicide, possibly for refusing to let the warlord marry his daughter. Ieyasu became a great collector of art and books, establishing libraries that would evolve into national treasures. The period's architectural legacy ranged from Fushimi Castle's lavish interiors to the stark beauty of Rikyu's Taian-tirum. Religious policy evolved through the three unifiers' reigns. Nobunaga suppressed militant Buddhism while tolerating Christianity. Hideyoshi initially continued this policy before issuing the 1587 edict expelling missionaries, though it was unevenly enforced. Ieyasu turned decisively against Christianity after seeing its potential to inspire rebellion, culminating in the 1614 nationwide ban. His promotion of Neo-Confucianism as state ideology provided philosophical underpinnings for the Tokugawa social order. The unifier's personalities became legendary. Nobunaga's unpredictability, from composing poetry mid-battle to violent rages, made him both feared and fascinating. Hideyoshi's cunning and ambition shone through in his mastery of both battlefield and court politics. Ieyasu's patience and strategic thinking were immortalized in his alleged motto, "Bear the unbearable." Their contrasting approaches to power, Nobunaga's naked force, Hideyoshi's cunning diplomacy, Ieyasu's institutionalization of authority, created complementary legacies that shaped Japan's early modern development. Military technology advanced rapidly under their rule. The shift from cavalry to massed infantry continued, with specialized units for arquebus, spears, and bows coordinating on battlefields. Castle design reached its zenith with innovations like stone-dropping holes and angled gun ports. Naval warfare developed through experiences in Korea and against Wako pirates, leading to larger, cannon-armed ships. Yet these innovations would become obsolete as the Pax Tokugawa made large-scale warfare a thing of the past. The unifier's impact on Japanese society was profound and lasting. They transformed a fractured archipelago into a unified nation-state with centralized institutions. Their policies created the social hierarchy that would define the Edo period. Their military campaigns became the stuff of legend, inspiring countless plays, novels, and films. Most importantly, they ended a century of constant warfare and created conditions for economic growth and cultural flourishing. By the time Ieyasu died in 1616, deified as Tasho Dagon at Nikko's spectacular shrine, Japan stood on the threshold of its early modern golden age, thanks to three extraordinary men, who each in their own way had conquered the realm. The Edo period dawned with Tokugawa Ieyasu's decisive victory at the siege of Osaka Castle in 1615, marking the final destruction of the Toyotomi clan and the beginning of Japan's longest period of peace. The Tokugawa shogunate established its capital in the swampy fishing village of Edo, transforming it into the world's largest city within a century. Ieyasu's successors built upon his foundations with meticulous precision. The second shogun Hidetada strengthened the Sankenkotai system, while the third shogun Iemitsu formalized Japan's isolation policy through a series of edicts between 1633 to 1639. These sakoku, closed country, laws prohibited Japanese from traveling abroad and restricted foreign trade to designated ports, creating a self-contained world that would develop unique cultural and social structures. The Tokugawa class system crystallized into its final form during the early 17th century. Samurai, comprising about 7% of the population, occupied the top tier as bureaucratic warriors increasingly divorced from actual combat. Their distinctive right to wear two swords became more symbolic than practical as decades of peace continued. Below them, peasants were honored in theory as producers of rice but heavily taxed in practice. Artisans occupied the third tier, while merchants nominally sat at the bottom, though many grew wealthy financing daimyo and samurai. The Eta and Heinen outcast classes handled tasks considered spiritually impure, their marginalization codified in law. This rigid hierarchy was enforced through detailed sumptuary laws regulating clothing, housing, and even hairstyles according to status. Edo's urban culture blossomed with the establishment of the floating world, ukiyo, entertainment districts. Licensed pleasure quarters like Yoshiwara became centers of artistic innovation, where courtesans, kabuki actors, and artists created a vibrant popular culture. The development of woodblock printing allowed mass production of ukiyo-e prints depicting beautiful women, famous actors, and landscapes. Ihara Saikaku's novels captured the hedonistic spirit of the merchant class, while Chikamatsu Manzaemon's puppet plays dramatized the conflicts between duty and emotion that characterized Tokugawa society. This flourishing of commoner culture occurred despite, or perhaps because of, the shogunate's strict Confucian moralizing. Economic growth transformed Japan during the Jinroku era, 1688 to 1704. The nationwide road system centered on Edo's 5 major highways stimulated commerce, with the Takedo Road between Edo and Kyoto becoming Japan's busiest artery. Post towns flourished along these routes, offering travelers accommodations, meals, and entertainment. Rice brokers in Osaka developed sophisticated futures markets, while sake brewers and textile merchants amassed fortunes that rivaled daimyo treasuries. The shogunate's currency system, based on gold, silver, and copper coins, facilitated this commercial revolution, though repeated debasements caused economic instability. Samurai culture underwent profound changes during the long peace. The Bushido code evolved from practical battlefield ethics to philosophical systems like Yamaga Soko's Way of the Warrior. Martial arts schools, Ryua, proliferated, transforming combat techniques into spiritual disciplines. The 18th century saw the rise of Bunbu Ryodo, the ideal of balancing literary and martial arts, as samurai increasingly served as administrators rather than warriors. Swordsmithing reached new aesthetic heights with the flamboyant hamon, temper lines, of the Shinto school, though the lack of battlefield testing meant these were often more decorative than functional. The shogunate faced its first major crisis during the Kyoho reforms, 1716 to 1745, under the 8th shogun Yashomin. Faced with financial strain from growing merchant wealth and samurai indebtedness, Yashomin implemented austerity measures and encouraged agricultural innovation. His legal reforms standardized punishments and established firefighting brigades in Edo. The shogun personally inspected judicial proceedings in dramatic ookeishi ceremonies where he overturned wrongful convictions. These reforms temporarily stabilized shogunate finances, but failed to address systemic economic changes undermining the feudal order. Rural Japan experienced both growth and unrest during the mid-Edo period. New crops like sweet potatoes and cash crops like cotton and indigo improved peasant livelihoods in some regions, while others suffered under heavy taxation. The 1780s Tenmei famine triggered widespread peasant uprisings, Ikki, and urban rice riots, Uchikawashi. The shogunate's response under senior counselor Tanumo Okitsugu, encouraging merchant monopolies and foreign trade, proved controversial and was reversed after his downfall. Natural disasters compounded these troubles, including the 1707 eruption of Mount Fuji and the 1792 collapse of Mount Unzen that caused a devastating tsunami. Intellectual life flourished despite, or because of Japan's isolation. The Kokugaku national learning movement sought to recover pre-Confucian Japanese traditions through study of ancient texts like the Kojiki. Rangaku, Dutch learning, allowed limited access to Western science and medicine through the Dutch trading post at Dejima. Scholars like Sugita Genpaku revolutionized Japanese medicine through anatomical studies, while Hiraga Janai experimented with electricity and Western painting techniques. This tension between nativism and selective Western influence would characterize Japanese intellectual life until the 19th century. The shogunate's control over the daimyo remained firm through the 18th century. The alternate attendance system ensured constant surveillance over regional lords while draining their finances through the requirement to maintain elaborate processions and Edo residences. Daimyo domains, Han, developed sophisticated bureaucracies to manage local affairs, with some like Satsuma and Chashu accumulating significant power that would later challenge the shogunate. The 1758 Horiki scandal revealed the limits of shogunal authority when the Satsuma daimyo's procession clashed with shogunate officials, leading to forced suicides on both sides. Urban commoners developed distinct subcultures that often flouted official morality. Kabuki theater, despite official restrictions, flourished with the development of Anagata female impersonators and dramatic aragoto, rough stuff, acting styles. The pleasure quarters cultivated sophisticated aesthetic ideals embodied in the Taiyu courtesan's 12-layered kimono and elaborate hair ornaments. Fireworks displays along the Sumida River and Cherry Blossom viewing at Ueno became annual civic rituals that cut across class lines. This vibrant commoner culture existed in tension with the shogunate's Confucian ideals of frugality and social order. By the early 19th century, cracks were appearing in the Tokugawa system. The 1837 Ashio Heihachi rebellion in Osaka, led by a former samurai official, exposed growing social tensions. Foreign ships increasingly violated Japan's maritime borders, culminating in the 1825 edict to repel foreign vessels that mandated firing on all approaching ships. The stage was set for the coming crisis that would end Japan's long isolation, though few could foresee how dramatically the country would soon transform. The Tokugawa system that had brought unprecedented stability now faced challenges it was ill-equipped to handle, as new forces both within and beyond Japan's borders threatened to shatter the carefully constructed peace. The samurai's daily existence during the Edo period embodied a paradox: warriors without war, living according to an ancient code in a rapidly modernizing society. Each morning began with ritual precision: the careful donning of formal kimono and hakama trousers, the ceremonial placement of both swords, daisho, in the obi sash, the longer katana and shorter wakizashi symbolizing the warrior's soul. The topknot, chanmage, originally practical for keeping a helmet secure, became an elaborate status marker requiring hours of grooming. Yet beneath these martial trappings, most samurai spent their days engaged in bureaucratic tasks, reviewing land surveys, calculating rice tax yields, or copying official documents in precise kanji characters. The shogunate's elaborate ranking system dictated every aspect of a samurai's life. Hatamoto, direct retainers of the shogun, occupied the highest positions with landholdings over 10,000 koku of rice. Middle-ranking samurai served domain administrations as magistrates, accountants, or military instructors. Low-ranking Ashigara-turned samurai often lived in near poverty, their meager stipends barely covering basic necessities. The 1710 ordinance on the recovery of masterless samurai revealed the system's cracks. Thousands of ronin wandered the countryside, some becoming scholars or mercenaries, others turning to banditry. The legendary 47 ronin incident of 1703, when masterless warriors avenged their lord's death before committing seppuku, became both a cultural touchstone and administrative headache for officials trying to balance Bushido ideals with public order. Samurai education blended martial and literary arts in carefully measured proportions. Domain schools, Hanko, taught Confucian classics to instill moral values, while calligraphy practice cultivated mental discipline. The martial curriculum included not just swordsmanship, kenjutsu, but also archery, kyujitsu, spear fighting, sojitsu, and equestrian skills. The 18th century saw the formalization of these combat techniques into ways, kenjutsu becoming kendo, archery evolving into kyudo, as emphasis shifted from battlefield effectiveness to spiritual development. The philosopher Yamaga Soko's 1656 Byukyo Shogaku codified Bushido principles emphasizing loyalty, frugality, and honor, though actual samurai behavior often fell short of these ideals. Domestic life for samurai families followed strict conventions. Marriages were arranged to strengthen clan alliances, with wives expected to master household management and social etiquette. The 1722 Ana Daigaku, Greater Learning for Women, outlined expectations for samurai wives: obedience to husbands and in-laws, prudent management of household finances, and proper child-rearing. Samurai children endured rigorous training from young ages, boys practicing wooden sword drills at 5, girls learning sewing and tea ceremony. The Tokugawa emphasis on hereditary status created tension when capable younger sons had limited prospects, while less competent eldest sons inherited positions and stipends. Financial pressures mounted throughout the Edo period as the rice-based economy struggled to accommodate commercial growth. Samurai stipends, fixed in koku measurements of rice, lost purchasing power as market prices fluctuated. Many resorted to borrowing from merchant creditors, despite official prohibitions. The 1789 Kansei reforms attempted to address this through debt cancellations and sumptuary laws, but failed to stem the tide. Some samurai turned to cottage industries like umbrella making or sword polishing, while others sold family heirlooms, a practice so common it spawned specialized pawnbrokers called sword lenders. The 1843 Tempo reforms desperate measures, including salary cuts for high-ranking retainers, only deepened resentment toward the shogunate. Sword culture reached its aesthetic zenith during the peaceful Edo period. Master smiths like Kotetsu and Masahide created blades with exquisite grain patterns, hata, and temper lines, hamon, though without battlefield testing, functionality sometimes suffered. The shogunate's 1651 sword hunt and subsequent weapons control edicts transformed swords from combat tools to status symbols. Elaborate koshiri mountings featuring lacquered scabbards and golden-laid hilts became art objects displayed in homes rather than carried daily. The 18th century saw the rise of tamashijiri, test cutting, competitions using rolled tatama mats to simulate human bodies, keeping swordsmanship skills alive in peacetime. Samurai involvement in arts and letters produced cultural treasures that defined the era. The haiku master Matsuo Basho, himself from a low-ranking samurai family, elevated the 17-syllable form to new heights with works like The Narrow Road to the Deep North. Samurai scholars such as Arai Hakaseki produced groundbreaking historical works, while Ojiu Sarai's philosophical writings reinterpreted Confucianism for Japanese realities. Even the tea ceremony, once the exclusive domain of aristocrats, became an essential samurai accomplishment, the austere wabicha style reflecting Bushido ideals of simplicity and discipline. The reality of samurai violence persisted beneath Edo's civilized veneer. While large-scale warfare disappeared, duels and vendettas continued. The 1638 Kenka Ryoseibai law attempted to curb violence by punishing both parties in any altercation, leading to more discreet killings. Some ronin formed secret societies like the Shinjioda Ryu, offering their services as assassins. The 1827 Boshin War between the Mito and Shirakawa domains showed how quickly political disputes could escalate into bloodshed, foreshadowing the violence that would engulf Japan in the 1860s. Regional variations created distinct samurai subcultures across Japan. Satsuma Domain's warriors maintained a Spartan lifestyle and secret military preparations, eventually fielding one of the strongest modern armies in the Bakumatsu period. The northern Eizu Domain's samurai women famously trained in naginata, halberd combat, resulting in tragic displays of martial prowess during the Boshin War. Edo-based Hatamoto developed elaborate etiquette rules governing everything from umbrella handling to proper sneezing techniques, while provincial samurai in Tosa or Hizen often lived closer to peasant farmers than urban bureaucrats. Religious practices reflected the samurai's unique position between spiritual and worldly concerns. Zen Buddhism remained popular for its emphasis on discipline and acceptance of death, with many warriors practicing zazen meditation. Shinto shrines like Tokyo's Yasukuni Jinja, founded 1869, enshrined warrior spirits, creating sacred spaces for Bushido values. Some samurai, particularly in western domains like Choshu, secretly converted to Christianity despite the shogunate's brutal persecutions. The 1865 discovery of hidden Christians in Nagasaki shocked Japanese authorities. The samurai's final transformation began as Western pressure mounted in the 1850s. Traditionalists clung to Sano joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, ideals, while realists recognized Japan's military inferiority. The 1863 bombardment of Kagoshima by British warships proved the futility of resisting foreign technology. Younger samurai like Sakamoto Ryoma began envisioning a new Japan where warrior status would be earned through merit rather than birth. The 1876 Heitoriai edict banning swords in public marked the symbolic end of samurai identity, though Bushido values would be repurposed for modern Japan's imperial ambitions. Samurai culture's legacy permeated every level of Japanese society long after the class itself disappeared. The Meiji government's 1899 imperial rescript on education distilled Bushido values into a national moral code for schoolchildren. Corporate culture adopted samurai-like loyalty and hierarchy well into the 20th century. Even today, the image of the sword-wielding warrior remains Japan's most recognizable cultural icon abroad, though the reality of samurai life was always more complex, more contradictory, and more human than the romanticized legends suggest. Their daily struggles to maintain honor in peacetime, to balance tradition with changing realities, and to find meaning when their original purpose had vanished, created a cultural archetype that continues to fascinate precisely because it speaks to universal human dilemmas. Women in samurai society occupied a complex position, simultaneously revered and restricted, empowered and constrained. While the iconic image of the female warrior, the Onabu geisha with her naginata halberd, captured popular imagination, the reality of women's lives encompassed far more nuanced roles. From the Heian period's aristocratic ladies to the Edo period's samurai wives, women navigated a shifting landscape of expectations and opportunities within Japan's warrior culture. The early samurai clans recognized women's vital role in maintaining family lineages and alliances. In the turbulent Kamakura period, women frequently managed estates while men were away at war. The legendary Hojo Masako, wife of Minamoto no Yoritamo, earned the title Nun Shogun for her political acumen in securing the Hojo regency after her husband's death. Her contemporary, Tomo Guzan, became famous as a female warrior who fought alongside Minamoto no Yashinaka during the Genpei War, her exploits immortalized in the tale of the Haika. These exceptional women demonstrated the capabilities female members of samurai families could display when circumstances demanded. Marriage in samurai society served primarily as a political tool for forging alliances between clans. Families carefully negotiated unions to strengthen military and economic ties, with brides serving as living symbols of these agreements. The elaborate Miyai marriage interview process involved exchanging detailed genealogical records and horoscopes to ensure compatibility. Once married, a samurai wife's primary duties centered on managing the household, supervising servants, and raising children, particularly sons who would inherit their father's position. The 17th century Ana Daigaku, Greater Learning for Women, codified these expectations, emphasizing obedience, frugality, and discretion as paramount virtues. Despite these prescribed roles, samurai women often wielded significant behind-the-scenes influence. They maintained crucial networks through letter writing and tea gatherings, exchanging information that could shape clan politics. During the Sengoku period's constant warfare, women frequently served as castle defenders when their husbands were away campaigning. Records from the 1575 siege of Nagashino Castle describe women pouring boiling water on attackers and tending wounded warriors. The Takeda clan's women were known to practice Najinata-jutsu as part of their daily routine, preparing for such eventualities. The Edo period's prolonged peace transformed samurai women's roles dramatically. With warfare eliminated, their values shifted toward domestic refinement and cultural accomplishments. The ideal Edo-era samurai wife mastered tea ceremony, ikebana flower arrangement, and calligraphy, skills that enhanced her family's social standing. Yet this emphasis on aesthetics concealed harsh realities. Women could be divorced for failing to produce male heirs, with remarriage often difficult. The 1711 Byukushohado laws explicitly prohibited jealous behavior by wives, reflecting ongoing tensions in marital relationships. Female education varied significantly by social class and region. While elite women in Kyoto might study classical poetry like the Tale of Genji, provincial samurai daughters often received practical training in accounting and household management. The Eizu domain became famous for its Joshigaku schools where young girls learned martial arts alongside traditional feminine arts. Their training manual, the Eizu clan's precepts for women, emphasized resilience and moral courage. Do not forget the righteous heart of a woman, even in the face of death. The Tokugawa shogunate's 1635 Byukushohado edicts formalized women's political exclusion, prohibiting them from inheriting domain leadership. However, exceptions occurred during times of crisis. When the Maeda clan's leadership faltered in 1600, Maeda Matsu successfully negotiated with Tokugawa Ieyasu to preserve her family's domain. Similarly, Yotodano, concubine of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, became a key power broker after his death, though her political maneuvering ultimately contributed to the Toyotomi clan's downfall at Osaka Castle. Lower-ranking samurai women faced different challenges. With limited household staff, they performed manual labor alongside peasant women, cooking, cleaning, and even working in family businesses. The 18th century economic crises forced many to take in sewing or weaving to supplement meager warrior stipends. Some became instructors at Terakoya temple schools, teaching basic literacy to commoner children. These practical experiences gave them a degree of independence unimaginable to their aristocratic counterparts. The entertainment districts offered alternative paths for women outside conventional roles. High-ranking courtesans, Taiyu, in Kyoto's Shimabara or Edo's Yoshiwara quarters cultivated sophisticated artistic skills and commanded prices equivalent to a samurai's annual stipend. Though legally prostitutes, the most successful enjoyed celebrity status and influenced fashion trends. Geisha, who emerged in 18th century Kyoto as skilled entertainers rather than sex workers, provided another model of female professionalism. These women's financial independence and cultural influence stood in stark contrast to the confined lives of respectable samurai wives. Religious institutions provided rare avenues for female autonomy. Buddhist nunneries offered refuge for widows, divorced women, or those seeking escape from arranged marriages. Some became renowned scholars like the Edo period nun Rengetsu, whose poetry and pottery gained widespread admiration. Shinto shrine maidens, Miko, performed sacred dances and rituals, occupying a unique spiritual role outside conventional gender norms. These alternatives, though limited, demonstrated that not all women conformed to the idealized samurai wife model. The Bakumatsu period, 1853 to 1868, brought dramatic changes to women's status as Japan faced Western imperialism. Samurai women like Yamamoto Yeiko of Eizu domain received firearms training alongside traditional naginata skills. Others became political activists. Nomura Bodo famously smuggled weapons for anti-shogun forces inside her palanquin. The 1871 Emancipation Edict officially abolished feudal status distinctions, theoretically freeing women from samurai-era restrictions. However, the Meiji government's 1898 Civil Code reinforced patriarchal family structures, proving that legal changes didn't automatically transform social attitudes. The legacy of samurai women remains contested in modern Japan. Some view them as symbols of feminine strength and resilience, pointing to historical figures like Nakano Takiko, who led women's units during the Boshin War. Others critique the oppressive aspects of their lives, particularly the Confucian-inspired ideologies that limited their autonomy. Contemporary popular culture alternately romanticizes and deconstructs these women, From NHK taiga dramas depicting noble samurai wives to feminist manga reimagining Anabi geisha as proto-feminist icons. Archaeological discoveries continue reshaping our understanding of women's roles in samurai society. Recent DNA analysis of battlefield remains confirmed female combatants at several Sengoku period sites. The 2017 excavation of a 16th-century castle town revealed women's quarters containing weapons alongside traditional domestic implements, blurring the line between martial and domestic spheres. These findings challenge simplistic portrayals of passive samurai women, suggesting their lives involved far more complexity than historical records typically indicate. The material culture of samurai women offers another window into their experiences. Elaborate kimono with restrained patterns reflected Confucian ideals of modesty, while subtle differences in sleeve length and obi width signaled marital status. Hair ornaments like kanzashi evolved from practical pins to status symbols, with certain styles reserved for married women. Personal items such as mirror stands and writing boxes often bore family crests, emphasizing clan identity over individual expression. Even suicide implements like kaiken daggers, carried by high-ranking women for ritual self-disembowelment, symbolized both their vulnerability and agency. Childbearing represented perhaps the most dangerous aspect of samurai women's lives. With no understanding of germ theory or proper hygiene, maternal mortality rates remained shockingly high throughout the feudal period. The 1790 Sanka Zue medical text recommended various herbal remedies and acupuncture points for difficult births, but provided little actual help. Successful delivery of a male heir brought immense social capital, while failure could result in divorce or demotion to concubine status. Some domains maintained special delivery castles, where pregnant women from important families could give birth under guard, protecting succession claims. The interplay between gender and class created striking contradictions. While samurai women enjoyed privileges over peasant and merchant class women, they also faced stricter behavioral controls. A merchant's wife might freely visit theaters and shops, while a high-ranking samurai woman required elaborate permissions for outings. Yet when financial pressures forced samurai families to marry daughters into wealthy merchant households, these women often introduced warrior-class values to the rising bourgeoisie, influencing Edo period cultural development in unexpected ways. As Japan modernized in the late 19th century, former samurai women played crucial, but often overlooked roles in building the new society. Many became educators, drawing on their classical training to teach at girls' schools. Others turned their domestic management skills toward running businesses or philanthropic organizations. The famous educator Suda Yumiko, daughter of a progressive samurai, founded one of Japan's first women's colleges in 1900, blending traditional values with Western learning. These transitional figures bridged the gap between feudal and modern Japan, carrying forward aspects of samurai culture while challenging its limitations. Today, the complex legacy of samurai women continues to resonate. Annual festivals like the Eizu Autumn Festival feature women performing Naginata-jutsu demonstrations, keeping martial traditions alive. Academic conferences re-evaluate historical documents through gender-sensitive lenses, uncovering previously ignored narratives. Meanwhile, contemporary working women in Japan still navigate expectations shaped by this feudal past. The tension between professional ambition and traditional domestic roles echoing the dual burdens shouldered by their samurai ancestors. In this sense, understanding these women's lives isn't just historical curiosity, but a means to comprehend the deep cultural roots of modern Japanese gender dynamics. Rebellion simmered beneath the surface of Tokugawa Japan's ordered society, erupting periodically to challenge the shogunate's authority. The roots of dissent stretched deep into the feudal system's contradictions, between the samurai's martial ideals and their bureaucratic reality, between the growing merchant class's wealth and their official low status, between the central government's demands and regional autonomy. These tensions manifested in peasant uprisings, samurai revolts, and intellectual challenges that gradually eroded the Tokugawa regime's foundations. Peasant rebellions, ikki, became increasingly common as the Edo period progressed. The 1783 Tenmei famine triggered over 130 uprisings across Japan, with starving farmers attacking granaries and tax offices. The 1836 Tempo uprising in Osaka saw thousands of peasants marching under banners reading "Justice for the Starving," their protest brutally suppressed by domain troops. These weren't mindless riots but organized political actions, Participants often drafted formal petitions listing grievances before resorting to violence. The shogunate's response alternated between limited concessions and brutal repression, never solving the systemic issues of heavy taxation and crop failures. Samurai discontent took more nuanced forms. The 1701 Ako incident, where 47 ronin avenged their lord's death, exposed the conflict between Bushido ideals and shogunate law. While popular culture celebrated their loyalty, the shogunate forced them to commit seppuku for taking the law into their own hands. Masterless samurai, ronin, posed an ongoing threat. The 1651 Kiin uprising plot involved hundreds planning to burn Edo, while the 1860 assassination of shogunate official Tu Naosuke by Mito samurai showed how easily discontent could turn violent. These incidents revealed the Tokugawa system's failure to provide meaningful roles for all its warrior class. Intellectual rebellions emerged from the shogunate's own institutions. The 1790 ban on heterodoxy attempted to suppress Confucian scholarship, challenging official interpretations, driving dissent underground. The Mito school's historical research, while initially sponsored by the Tokugawa branch family there, ultimately produced the Sano Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, ideology that undermined shogunate legitimacy. Yoshida Shoin's private academy in Chashu trained a generation of anti-Tokugawa activists, despite his 1859 execution. These thinkers weaponized the shogunate's own emphasis on scholarship to critique its policies. Regional domains nurtured resistance through calculated disobedience. The Satsuma domain in Kyushu secretly built a modern military while publicly complying with shogunate orders. Their 1862 Namamuji incident, where samurai killed a British merchant, deliberately provoked foreign pressure on the Tokugawa government. Chasha domain went further, openly defying the shogunate in 1864 by firing on foreign ships and later seizing control of Kyoto's imperial palace. These actions demonstrated how peripheral powers could exploit the shogunate's weakening grip. The shogunate's control mechanisms gradually lost effectiveness. The Senkinkotai system, designed to drain daimyo finances, backfired as domains developed commercial enterprises to fund their Edo residences. Censorship failed to stop underground publishing. Satirical kabuyoshi picture books mocked officials, while Dutch learning rangaku scholars disseminated forbidden Western ideas. Even the secret police network, Metsuke, couldn't prevent information from flowing along merchant networks and pilgrim routes. Religious movements provided organizational structures for dissent. The Fujifu's Nichiren sect, banned in 1669 for refusing to associate with other Buddhists, continued operating secretly for 2 centuries. Shimabara's Christian rebels in 1637-38 demonstrated how faith could inspire resistance to both feudal lords and shogunate. In the 19th century, new religions like Tenrikyo attracted followers among the disaffected, their communal practices offering alternatives to Tokugawa social structures. Economic changes undermined the feudal order more effectively than any rebellion. The shift from rice-based taxation to monetary economy impoverished many samurai while enriching merchants. Osaka's rice brokers developed futures trading that made commodity prices more volatile, exacerbating peasant hardships. Regional specialization, silk production in Fukushima, porcelain in Arita, created economic networks bypassing Edo's control. When the shogunate debased currency to cover deficits, it only accelerated loss of confidence in the entire system. Foreign pressure exposed the shogunate's vulnerabilities after 1853. The U.S. Navy's black ships under Commodore Perry demanded, and received, trade concessions through gunboat diplomacy. The 1858 unequal treaties, signed under duress, granted foreigners extraterritorial rights that sparked nationalist outrage. Attempts to modernize defenses, like the 1855 Nagasaki Naval Training Center, couldn't overcome decades of technological isolation. Each foreign intrusion further eroded Tokugawa legitimacy, while empowering anti-shogun factions. The shogunate's final crisis began with unlikely revolutionaries. Lower-ranking samurai from peripheral domains, Satsuma, Chashu Tosa, orchestrated the Meiji Restoration under the banner of restoring imperial rule. Their 1868 coup succeeded because they co-opted rather than opposed traditional authority, using the young Emperor Meiji as their figurehead. The Boshin War that followed saw modernized rebel armies defeat shogunate forces at Toba Fushimi, despite the Tokugawa's theoretical numerical advantage. By 1869, the last Tokugawa loyalists surrendered in Hokkaido, ending over 250 years of rule. Rebellion's aftermath transformed Japan more profoundly than the rebels anticipated. The very samurai who overthrew the shogunate found their privileges abolished in the 1870s as Japan modernized. Peasant uprisings continued against the new government's westernizing policies, like the 1873 protests against conscription. Former shogunate officials found employment in the Meiji bureaucracy, their administrative experience proving more valuable than their feudal loyalties. The rebellious spirit that toppled the Tokugawa regime ultimately created a centralized state far more powerful than the shogunate had ever been. The Tokugawa system's collapse revealed rebellion's paradoxical role in Japanese history. Periodic uprisings had actually helped maintain stability by allowing pressure release within the feudal structure. When foreign intervention disrupted this balance, dissent snowballed into revolution. Yet the rebels who seized power didn't fully reject the past. They selectively preserved elements like emperor worship and bureaucratic governance while discarding others. This pattern of controlled rebellion and managed change would characterize Japan's modernization, from the Meiji era through post-war economic transformation. The Tokugawa's opponents succeeded not by destroying the old system entirely, but by harnessing its useful remnants to build the new. The middle to late Edo period, 1716 to 1868, witnessed the gradual unraveling of Tokugawa Japan's carefully constructed order. What began as minor cracks in the foundation eventually became seismic fissures that would topple the entire edifice. The Kyoho reforms, 1716 to 1745, under the 8th shogun Tokugawa Yashomian, marked the first serious attempt to address systemic problems. Yashomian, known as the rice shogun for his frugal habits, implemented austerity measures that temporarily stabilized government finances. His establishment of the Uka court improved judicial fairness, while the creation of firefighting brigades addressed Edo's chronic vulnerability to blazes. Yet these administrative tweaks couldn't reverse the fundamental economic shifts undermining the feudal structure. The commercialization of the economy accelerated throughout the 18th century, eroding the samurai's privileged position. As rice stipends lost value to inflation, many lower-ranking warriors fell into genteel poverty, forced to take up handicrafts or secretly marry into merchant families for financial survival. The growing urban merchant class, though officially despised, wielded increasing economic power through their control of credit and commerce. Osaka's rice brokers developed sophisticated futures markets, while textile merchants in Kyoto amassed fortunes that dwarfed many daimyo treasuries. This inversion of the Confucian social hierarchy created simmering resentment among samurai, who clung to their status while growing dependent on merchant loans. Cultural expressions reflected these tensions. The flourishing ukiyo-e woodblock prints often depicted merchants enjoying the pleasures of the floating world, while samurai appeared as comic figures, proud but penniless. Literary works like Jipensha Ikka's Tokedaka Hizakurage, 1802 to 1822, followed the misadventures of two feckless samurai, their bumbling antics a far cry from the noble warriors of legend. Even kabuki theater, which had originated with samurai themes, increasingly catered to merchant tastes with lavish productions and celebrity actors. The Tenmei era, 1781 to 1789, brought catastrophe that exposed the regime's fragility. A combination of volcanic eruptions, crop failures, and government mismanagement triggered widespread famine. The Great Tenmei Famine, 1782 to 1788, killed nearly 1 million people, with reports of cannibalism in the hardest-hit regions. Peasant uprisings, Ikki, erupted across the country, their frequency increasing from 25 per year in the 1730s to over 100 annually by the 1780s. The shogunate's response, issuing moral exhortations while raising taxes, only deepened the crisis. Matsudaira Sadanobu's Kansei reforms, 1787 to 1793, attempted to restore stability through draconian measures. He imposed strict sumptuary laws, censored frivolous literature, and purged heterodox Confucian scholars from official positions. His policies temporarily reduced peasant unrest, but stifled the intellectual and economic vitality that had characterized mid-Edo Japan. The reforms also failed to address the underlying problem, a feudal system trying to function in an increasingly commercialized society. The 19th century opened with new challenges. The Tempo era, 1830 to 1844, saw another devastating famine, followed by the largest peasant uprising in Edo history, the Ashio Heihachi Rebellion of 1837. A former police official turned Confucian scholar, Ashio led hundreds of starving Osaka residents in an attack on government offices and merchant warehouses. His manifesto condemned the heartless officials who pile up gold and silver while the people starve. Though quickly crushed, the rebellion sent shockwaves through the establishment, proving that even Japan's most prosperous cities weren't immune to revolt. The shogunate's tempo reforms, 1841 to 1843, under Mizuno Tadakuni, represented the most desperate attempt yet to turn back the clock. He dissolved merchant guilds, ordered samurai to return to their domains, and attempted to force rice prices down by decree. The reforms backfired spectacularly. Economic chaos worsened, and Mizuno was forced from office. His failure demonstrated the impossibility of solving modern problems with feudal solutions. Meanwhile, intellectual life continued evolving in ways that undermined Tokugawa legitimacy. The Kokugaku, national learning, movement, led by scholars like Motori Norinaga, rejected Chinese influences in favor of Japan's pure, ancient traditions. Their studies of the Kojiki and other early texts fostered a new appreciation for the emperor's divine status, an idea that would later fuel anti-shogun sentiment. At the same time, Rangaku, Dutch learning, scholars like Takano Chui and Watanabe Kazan introduced Western science and political thought, despite government persecution. The arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry's black ships in 1853 shattered Japan's isolation and accelerated the shogunate's decline. Forced to sign unequal treaties granting foreigners extraterritorial rights, the Tokugawa government appeared weak and ineffectual. Domains like Satsuma and Chashu, long resentful of Tokugawa dominance, seized the opportunity to challenge central authority. The 1858 Ansei purges, in which the shogunate arrested and executed reformist scholars, only deepened opposition. The final decades of Tokugawa rule became a chaotic scramble for survival. The shogunate attempted modernization, establishing naval schools, importing Western weapons, but couldn't keep pace with more agile regional rivals. The 1866 Sacho alliance between Satsuma and Chashu marked the beginning of the end, as these powerful domains united against the Tokugawa. When the young Emperor Meiji came to the throne in 1867, anti-shogun forces maneuvered to have imperial authority restored, a carefully staged coup that allowed them to claim legitimacy while overthrowing the existing order. The Boshin War, 1868 to 1869, pitted the shogunate's forces against the imperial loyalists in a conflict that mixed traditional samurai combat with modern warfare. Despite early advantages in numbers and territory, the Tokugawa side suffered from poor leadership and outdated tactics. The fall of Edo Castle in April 1868 effectively ended shogunate rule, though loyalist resistance continued in northern Japan until 1869. The transition from Tokugawa to Meiji rule wasn't the clean break it later appeared. Many former shogunate officials found employment in the new government, their administrative expertise proving invaluable. The samurai class was gradually disbanded through a series of measures culminating in the 1876 Heitoriai, sword abolition edict, but Bushido values were repurposed to serve modern nationalism. Even the economic system retained feudal elements. Land taxes continued to fund government operations well into the Meiji period. The late Edo period's true significance lies in its demonstration of how a sophisticated feudal order adapted, and ultimately failed to adapt, to changing circumstances. The Tokugawa system had maintained stability for over 2 centuries through careful balance and controlled change. When faced with unprecedented internal and external pressures, its mechanisms for self-correction proved inadequate. Yet the very institutions that collapsed, the domain governments, the samurai bureaucracy, the alternate attendance system, left legacies that would shape modern Japan in unexpected ways. The Tokugawa fall wasn't so much an ending as a transformation, one whose consequences continue to resonate in Japanese society today. The intellectual currents of Tokugawa Japan flowed through underground channels, quietly eroding the foundations of the shogunate while appearing to uphold its Confucian ideals. In the early 18th century, Arai Hakaseki's rationalist historiography began questioning long-accepted myths, his Dokushi Yoran subjecting imperial chronology to skeptical scrutiny. This critical approach spread through the samurai bureaucracy, creating officials who valued evidence over tradition. Meanwhile, in Kyoto's salons and Nagasaki's Dutch trading post, other thinkers were absorbing even more radical ideas that would eventually transform Japan. The Kyoho era, (1716 to 1736), saw the first organized challenge to Neo-Confucian orthodoxy. Ojiu Sorai's ancient learning movement rejected metaphysical speculation in favor of practical statecraft, arguing that Confucius himself had focused on concrete governance rather than abstract ethics. His disciples established private academies where they debated land reform and currency policy, topics considered dangerously political. The shogunate tolerated these discussions until the 1790 Kansei edicts banned heterodox studies, driving dissent underground but failing to extinguish it. Dutch learning, Rangaku, provided another vector for new ideas. Starting as narrow medical studies, the 1774 Kaitai Shinsho, Japan's first anatomy text translated from Dutch, it expanded into astronomy, physics, and military science. Scholars like Hiraga Janai conducted electrical experiments while others built working steam engines. The shogunate alternately encouraged and suppressed these studies, recognizing their utility but fearing their implications. When Watanabe Kazan painted Western-style portraits and criticized isolationism in the 1830s, he was forced to commit suicide, a warning that Rangaku's boundaries remained perilously narrow. The Kokugaku national learning movement took the opposite approach, looking backward rather than outward. Motori Norinaga's 44-year study of the tale of Genji evolved into a radical nativism that rejected all Chinese influence. His Kojiki-den commentary on Japan's ancient chronicles argued that the emperor's divine lineage made him the only legitimate ruler, a direct challenge to Tokugawa authority. This scholarly project became politically explosive when paired with the Sano Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, slogan that would mobilize anti-shogun forces. Regional academies nurtured these intellectual rebellions. The Shokusanjiku in Chashu, run by Yoshida Shoin from a modest farmhouse, produced leaders of the Meiji Restoration. Its curriculum blended Kokugaku reverence for the emperor with practical military science. Students practiced rifle drills alongside poetry composition. Similar schools in Mito and Satsuma became incubators for revolutionary thought, their networks of alumni forming the backbone of the anti-Tokugawa movement. Economic thought evolved alongside political philosophy. The Osaka merchant scholar Yamagata Banto articulated sophisticated theories of monetary policy in his 1820 Yum no Shiro, advocating for paper currency and free markets. Peasant philosophers like Ninomiya Santoku developed grassroots ethical systems that combined Confucian morality with practical farming techniques. Even the shogunate's own advisors, like Honda Toshiaki, began arguing for colonial expansion and industrialization, ideas drawn from European examples but adapted to Japanese conditions. Religious movements channeled intellectual dissent in creative ways. The Fujifuse Nichiren sect maintained secret networks for 2 centuries after its 1669 prohibition, its adherents developing elaborate theological justifications for civil disobedience. New religions like Kuro Zamikyo and Tenrikyo blended Shinto and Buddhist elements with egalitarian social visions that implicitly criticized feudal hierarchies. When the government cracked down, these groups simply went underground, preserving their teachings through oral traditions and hidden texts. The arts became vehicles for subtle subversion. The Kyoka, mad verse, poetry movement used humor to skewer authority figures, while Kibyoshi picture books satirized samurai pretensions. Artists like Katsushika Hokusai and Utagawa Kuniyashi inserted political commentary into ukiyo-e prints. Kuniyashi's famous Taihiki Ayuden series used historical warriors to represent contemporary reformers, a visual code his audience understood perfectly. Even kabuki plays contained veiled critiques, with actors altering lines to reflect current events until censors intervened. The arrival of Western ships in the 1850s accelerated these intellectual fermentations. Translations of international law texts introduced concepts of national sovereignty that undermined the shogunate's claims to represent Japan. Medical students dissecting Dutch anatomy manuals absorbed Enlightenment ideas about human equality along with surgical techniques. The Nagasaki Naval Training Center, established in 1855 to teach modern navigation, became an unintentional clearinghouse for progressive political thought. The shogunate's final years saw a desperate attempt to co-opt these intellectual currents. The 1860s saw government-sponsored missions to Europe and America, while the Kaisejo school in Edo taught Western science alongside Confucian classics. But it was too little, too late. The thinkers the regime had persecuted for decades now held the initiative. When the Meiji Restoration came in 1868, Its leaders were men steeped in both Kokugaku nativism and Western political economy, able to articulate a vision that appealed to traditionalists and modernizers alike. The intellectual legacy of late Tokugawa Japan proved surprisingly durable. The Meiji government's 1872 education system built upon domain school networks established during the Edo period. Western-style universities incorporated Rangaku's empirical approach while maintaining Confucian ethical frameworks. Even the 1889 Meiji Constitution, though modeled on European examples, contained echoes of Tokugawa political theory in its careful balancing of imperial authority and bureaucratic governance. These intellectual currents didn't disappear with feudalism, they adapted. The Kokugaku emphasis on Japanese uniqueness resurfaced in 20th century nationalism. Rangaku's pragmatic engagement with Western thought anticipated Japan's later technological prowess. The merchant scholar's economic theories informed Meiji industrialization policies. What began as scattered challenges to Tokugawa orthodoxy became the foundation for modern Japan's distinctive synthesis of tradition and innovation, a testament to the power of ideas to shape history even when suppressed. The final act of Japan's samurai era unfolded with both tragic inevitability and revolutionary fervor. The Boshin War's last shots echoed across Hokkaido's frozen landscapes in 1869, where the remnants of Tokugawa loyalists made their desperate stand at Goriakaku Fort. Inomoto Takeyaki's mixed force of French-trained shogunate troops and Ainu warriors held out for months before starvation forced their surrender. This anticlimactic ending belied the seismic changes already transforming Japan. The imperial capital moved to Edo, renamed Tokyo, the samurai class disbanded, and a new government promising civilization and enlightenment began dismantling 7 centuries of feudal tradition. The Meiji oligarchs faced an impossible contradiction: how to preserve Japan's essence while adopting foreign innovations. Their 1871 abolition of domains, Heian Chiken, destroyed the daimyo system overnight, replacing feudal fiefs with modern prefectures. Former samurai found their rice stipends converted to government bonds in 1876, the same year the Heitoriai Edict banned public sword-wearing. These reforms sparked violent backlash: the 1874 Saga Rebellion, 1876 Shinpiran Uprising, and culminating in Seigo Takamori's 1877 Satsuma Rebellion. When imperial troops armed with modern rifles crushed Seigo's traditional samurai army at Shirayama, it marked more than a military defeat. It symbolized the passing of an entire way of life. Japan's rapid modernization created bizarre cultural hybrids. Former samurai bureaucrats now wore Western-style uniforms and studied constitutional law, while their wives struggled with corsets and parasols. The 1872 Education Ordinance established compulsory schooling modeled on American systems, yet classrooms still taught Confucian ethics alongside mathematics. Tokyo's Ginza district became a showcase of brick and stone civilization, its gaslit streets lined with imitation European buildings that housed traditional tea shops and kimono dealers. This jarring juxtaposition of old and new characterized Japan's entire modernization process. The military transformed most dramatically. The 1873 conscription ordinance created a national army drawn from commoners, an unthinkable concept under samurai rule. Prussian advisors like Major Clemens Meckel restructured Japan's forces along modern lines, while naval architects borrowed freely from British and French designs. By the 1894-95 Sino-Japanese War, Japan fielded a thoroughly westernized military that stunned observers with its discipline and effectiveness. The same samurai spirit that once fueled cavalry charges now manifested in naval gunnery precision and infantry bayonet drills. Economic changes proved equally radical. The land tax reform of 1873 monetized agricultural payments, forcing peasants into the cash economy. Zaibatsu conglomerates like Mitsui and Sumitomo evolved from Edo-period merchant houses into industrial giants. Former samurai became entrepreneurs. The founder of Japan's first modern cotton mill, Shibusawa Eiichi, had once fought for the Tokugawa. By 1900, Japan's silk exports dominated world markets, its railroads crisscrossed the archipelago, and its factories produced everything from matches to locomotives. Cultural preservation emerged as a countercurrent to modernization. The 1889 imperial rescript on education blended Confucian morality with nationalist ideology, creating an ethical framework for the new Japan. Scholars like Okakura Kikuzo wrote passionately about preserving traditional arts, even while embracing Western technology. This Japanese spirit, Western techniques, wakan yosai, approach allowed Meiji society to modernize without completely westernizing, a delicate balancing act that would characterize Japan's relationship with the outside world for generations. The samurai legacy found unexpected new expressions. Bushido values were repurposed for modern nationalism through books like Naito Binatsu's 1899 Bushido, The Soul of Japan. Kendo and Judo transformed feudal combat techniques into sports and character-building exercises. Even the tea ceremony became a tool of cultural diplomacy, served to foreign dignitaries in rooms designed to showcase Japanese aesthetics. This reinvention of tradition gave modern Japan roots in an imagined warrior past that was at once authentic and carefully curated. Imperial expansion became the new frontier for samurai ideals. The 1874 Taiwan expedition, 1895 seizure of Formosa, and 1910 annexation of Korea provided outlets for martial energies that might otherwise have turned inward. Former samurai like Togo Hihikairo found new purpose in imperial service. His 1905 destruction of the Russian Baltic Fleet at Tsushima echoed the naval victories of medieval Japanese pirates. This overseas expansion also created tensions, as traditional Bushido values clashed with the realities of colonial administration and modern warfare. The early 20th century saw Japan's samurai heritage simultaneously celebrated and obscured. Historical novels and kabuki plays romanticized the feudal past while ignoring its harsher realities. The 1912 publication of The Abe Clan by Mori Oge explored the psychological costs of Bushido through the story of a family ordered to commit mass suicide. Meanwhile, Tokyo's first department stores sold both traditional crafts and imported goods, embodying the dual identity of modern Japanese consumers. World War II represented the final, tragic distortion of samurai values. Kamikaze pilots were likened to medieval warriors in official propaganda, their suicide attacks framed as spiritual rather than military acts. The 1945 defeat shattered these myths. When Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, he did so not in classical court language, but in formal modern Japanese, underscoring the complete break with tradition that the war's aftermath demanded. Post-war Japan rebuilt itself, once again by selectively drawing on its past. The 1964 Tokyo Olympics showcased both bullet trains and woodblock prints, tea ceremonies, and electronic gadgets. Corporate warriors replaced feudal ones, their loyalty transferred from lords to companies. Martial arts became global exports, while Zen Buddhism influenced everything from architecture to business management. This adaptive resilience, the same quality that allowed Tokugawa Japan to survive for 265 years, enabled post-war Japan to rise from ashes to economic superpower status in a single generation. The samurai's enduring presence in global popular culture speaks to their powerful symbolic value. From Kurosawa's films to manga, video games to business books, they represent both a romanticized past and timeless ideals of discipline and mastery. Yet historical scholarship continues uncovering more complex realities. The violence and oppression that coexisted with Bushido's noble ideals, the diversity of experiences across regions and social classes, the gradual evolution of warrior culture over 7 centuries. Today's Japan still bears the imprint of its samurai past in subtle but profound ways. The emphasis on group harmony over individual assertion, the respect for hierarchy and protocol, the aesthetic appreciation for imperfection and transience, all reflect values shaped during the feudal era. Even the modern language preserves these connections, with honorific speech levels originating in courtly etiquette and warrior codes. The true legacy of Japan's samurai tradition lies not in swords or armor, but in the nation's remarkable ability to reinvent itself while maintaining cultural continuity. From the Meiji Restoration to the post-war economic miracle, Japan has repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to absorb foreign influences without losing its essential character, a skill first honed during the turbulent transition from medieval to early modern Japan. The samurai era's end was not a disappearance but a transformation, its spirit enduring in forms that would have been unrecognizable to Minamoto no Yoritamo or Tokugawa Ieyasu, but which nonetheless carry forward their world in ways both visible and unseen.